They say most betrayals don't come from enemies, but from those you trust the most. I learned that the hard way, 7 years into a marriage I thought was unbreakable, and a decade into a business partnership I thought was built on brotherhood. My name's Nathan, 35, grew up in Pittsburgh. I wasn't born with wealth, but I built something real out of nothing. My best friend, Alex, and I started our company from a garage with 2 laptops and a coffee machine that barely worked. We were nobodies who clawed our way up. Clients came. Contracts rolled in. Before I hit 30, we were running one of the fastest growing design firms in the city. And then there was Sophia. God, she was everything. Smart, graceful, magnetic in a way that made every room stop and notice when she walked in. We met at a bookstore cafe. She was reading Graham Greene. I was ordering my usual black drip. She smiled at me, soft, curious, and my heart did something I hadn't felt in years. By our 3rd date, I was already imagining a future. Within a year, she moved in. 6 months later, we were married in a small ceremony by the lake. Life felt complete. We weren't perfect, but we were strong. Or at least, I thought we were. She helped with the business here and there, ideas, branding, social pitches. And when we had our first big corporate client, she celebrated like it was her own victory. I remember thinking, this is it. I made it. Business, love, stability. It doesn't get better than this. I was wrong. So wrong. The day it all fell apart was a Thursday. I remember because I'd had a meeting canceled last minute. A client had a family emergency. So, I figured I'd head home early, grab Sophia's favorite wine, and surprise her with dinner. It had been a rough week, and she mentioned she was tired. I thought I'd be the good husband, romantic, thoughtful. It was raining a little, that soft kind of drizzle that makes the city glisten. When I walked up to the townhouse, I noticed something strange. The front door was slightly ajar. Sophia always locked it. Always. My first instinct was to think maybe she forgot. She was scatterbrained sometimes. I pushed the door open and stepped in quietly, carrying the wine in one hand, a smile already forming. Then I saw them. Not immediately. First I heard them. Muffled sounds. Whispers. Then a soft moan. Hers. I stood frozen in the hallway. It's strange how your brain works when it's trying to protect you. I kept telling myself, it's the TV. She's watching a movie. It's nothing. But my gut already knew. I stepped forward. And that's when I saw it. Through the crack in the bedroom door. Her. On top of someone. Her hands in his hair. Her mouth on his neck. And then I saw his face. Alex. My best friend. The man I built a company with. The man I toasted beers with after 12-hour workdays. The man who gave a speech at my wedding. I didn't say a word. I didn't throw the wine or scream or curse or punch a wall. I just turned around, walked into the living room, sat on the couch, waited. A few minutes later, they came out. She was wrapped in a robe, hair tousled. He looked scared, like a kid caught stealing. Her face went pale when she saw me. Nathan, she whispered. I said nothing. Alex stepped forward like an idiot. It's not what it looks like. Don't. I cut him off. My voice was calm, flat. Don't insult me. I stood, walked past them, went to the bedroom, packed a single bag, and left. No screaming. No explanation. Just silence. And that silence screamed louder than anything I could have said. The next few nights were a blur. I checked into a hotel downtown. Didn't eat much. Didn't sleep. Just stared at the ceiling. My mind replaying every conversation, every late night at the office when Alex said he had to finish paperwork, every time Sophia stayed out with the girls. I was living in a story that had been edited behind my back. The texts came first, then the calls, then the voicemails. She cried in most of them. He didn't. His tone was colder, more defensive. He tried to spin it, claimed it was a one-time thing, claimed they were confused, that it just happened. But it hadn't just happened. You don't end up in someone's bed by accident. This had been going on for a while. That's when the rage kicked in. Not the kind of rage that makes you punch walls. The kind that makes you focus. Think. Strategize. I started digging. As the co-owner and financial director of our company, I had access to everything. Emails, transactions, contracts. I went over every file with surgical precision. And what I found chilled me more than that bedroom ever could. Alex had been siphoning clients, redirecting contracts to a new firm, one he had registered under a shell name 3 months ago. Guess whose name was on the registration as the marketing consultant? Sophia. Not only had they betrayed me personally, they had tried to cut me out professionally. Slowly, quietly, like parasites draining blood from a sleeping host. But I was awake now. I hired a forensic accountant, quietly brought in a corporate lawyer, built a case, detailed, undeniable. Then I filed the paperwork to freeze the company's accounts and called for a mandatory shareholder meeting. The day of that meeting, Alex showed up smug, wearing a new suit, like nothing was wrong. I stood in front of the board and presented everything: the transfers, the shell company, the fake invoices, the phone logs, emails, texts. It was surgical, cold, devastating. He was removed from the company within the hour, effective immediately. Sophia was there too. She stood in the back of the room, arms folded, eyes red, but she didn't say a word. She looked smaller than I remembered, less radiant, like the lies had drained her too. I didn't speak to her that day, or the next. I moved back into my house. She had already left. Took some clothes, a few books. Left her wedding ring on the counter like it was something cheap she bought from a vending machine. And you know what? That silence, again, was the best part. No fights, no explanations, no half-baked apologies. Just distance. Cold, beautiful distance. Funny thing is, the deeper you sink, the more you learn what you're capable of. And I was just getting started. Because this isn't a story about heartbreak. This is a story about what happens after. The days after I kicked Alex out of the company were blurry. I didn't sleep much, didn't eat much. I lived on adrenaline. The only thing I could focus on was rebuilding what was mine, making sure I came out of this stronger than before. But at the same time, there was something else. A burning need to ensure that Alex and Sophia suffered. I wasn't an angry man. I wasn't a reckless man. But I was a man who knew how to get what he wanted, and what I wanted now was not only to take back what was mine, but to leave them in the dust. They thought they could replace me. They thought they could quietly cut me out, get away with it, and move on. But they were wrong. The more I uncovered about their betrayal, the clearer my path became. Sophia wasn't just part of the scheme. She was a willing participant. I had always trusted her, loved her. But now, I saw her for what she truly was, a woman who betrayed not just her husband, but the life we had built together. And Alex? He wasn't just a friend anymore. He was a business partner who turned out to be a thief, a liar, and someone who would stop at nothing to take what wasn't his. The first thing I did was secure my position in the company. I filed all the necessary paperwork, hired new financial advisors, and made sure I had full control over the assets. Then, I focused on eliminating any trace of Alex's involvement. I went through every project, every deal, every email, and I cut him out. It was clean, surgical. No one ever saw it coming. But revenge wasn't enough. I needed more than just winning back what was mine. I needed to move forward, to grow. That's when I met her. Liana. It was at a business event, one of those gala dinners where people smile, shake hands, and pretend to be friends. I didn't want to be there, but I had to. Networking. The usual grind. Liana was different. She wasn't there for the same reasons as the others. While everyone else clinked glasses and exchanged meaningless pleasantries, she was standing by herself, leaning against the balcony railing, looking out over the city. The lights flickered below, but her eyes weren't on the view. They were fixed somewhere deeper, somewhere I couldn't quite place. I approached her, naturally. I didn't know what to expect, but I wasn't expecting her to be so different. "You don't seem like you belong here," I said, smiling a little. She turned, her eyes meeting mine. There was something about her gaze, sharp, yet soft. She didn't smile at first. Instead, she looked me up and down, sizing me up. "I could say the same about you," she replied, her voice low but confident. I was intrigued. We started talking, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of connection. Liana was intelligent, driven, and unapologetically real. She wasn't like the women I'd known. She wasn't caught up in the games or the pretentiousness of the world we lived in. She didn't need validation from anyone. But what struck me most was her story. She didn't tell me everything at once. She was guarded, mysterious, like she had her own demons she was hiding from. I could tell she'd been through her own struggles, and that made me respect her. In a way, she felt like a mirror to my own darkness. She had lived through pain, but she wasn't consumed by it. She was stronger for it. We exchanged numbers, and over the next few weeks, we met for coffee, for dinner. It wasn't fast. It wasn't rushed. But as time passed, I realized that I was starting to look forward to seeing her more than I cared to admit. She had a way of making me forget about the betrayal, about Sophia, about Alex. She was something else, Someone who reminded me that life didn't end just because of the people who hurt you. I hadn't realized how much I needed that reminder until she came into my life. But even with Liana, my mind was still on revenge. I couldn't ignore it. It was always in the back of my head, simmering, waiting for the right moment. That moment came sooner than I expected. I got the call from the private investigator. Sophia had started her own company, using the knowledge she'd taken from our business, and Alex was involved, of course. They were back at it, trying to build something on the ruins of what I had worked so hard to create. But this time, it was different. They weren't just using my work to survive. They were trying to undermine my current clients, poach my best people, and steal the clients I had worked so hard to gain. This was no longer just personal. This was business. I knew what I had to do. I'd already won in the courtroom. I'd already taken the company back. But that wasn't enough. I needed to make sure they couldn't touch anything else. I needed to ruin them completely. Make them disappear like they never existed in my world. And I would do it all while moving forward, building something even better. I was going to show them that you don't destroy someone and expect them to crawl into a hole and die. No, you destroy them, and then you rise above. Liana wasn't part of this world. I wasn't going to drag her into my mess, but I also knew she was the one person who could see me clearly. She didn't need me to be perfect. She saw my scars and didn't shy away from them. But she also knew I wasn't the man I used to be. The man who had been betrayed. The man who had been broken. Now, I was a man on a mission. And nothing would stop me from taking back everything I deserved. I had learned long ago that patience was a weapon. Revenge doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be filled with drama. It just needs to be methodical. And that was exactly what I was doing, dismantling everything they thought was theirs, piece by piece. I'd already done the most important part, taking back my company. I'd cut Alex out with surgical precision, and now, I needed to make sure Sophia's little operation would never see the light of day. I started small. Business, like everything else, is built on connections. And I had plenty of those. The first step was to make sure no one would work with them, not even the most loyal clients from our old roster. I knew all the right people in this industry. So I started with a quiet word here and there, a conversation with a few key influencers who didn't know the full story. They didn't need to. All they needed to know was that working with Sophia or Alex could hurt their reputation. That was enough to get the ball rolling. Alex didn't understand what was happening at first. He probably thought I was sulking in some corner, licking my wounds, too broken to fight back. But then, when I began to see the first signs of his contracts falling apart, clients pulling out, deals falling through, I knew he was starting to panic. I enjoyed watching him squirm, but I knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. Sophia, though, was another story. She was more resilient, more resourceful than I had given her credit for. And, like me, she wasn't going to go down without a fight. But she made one mistake. She underestimated me. I had someone keep an eye on her. It was easy, really. She was still attending networking events, meeting with clients, trying to salvage what little she could. But there was one thing she hadn't accounted for. I knew her weaknesses. I knew what made her tick, what kept her up at night. I knew how she'd react when things started falling apart, how she'd panic and try to cover her tracks. I was counting on it. The first time I saw her break, it was over a phone call. I had set up a meeting with one of her biggest clients. They had been with us before I sold the company to Alex. This was the one account she couldn't afford to lose. If I could get them to leave her, it would be the beginning of the end. I showed up early to the meeting, waiting in the lobby of a high-end restaurant, pretending to be the same old Nathan, polite, calm, collected. But inside, I was a different man. I was the man who had been betrayed, who had lost everything he thought he could trust. When she walked in, her face was carefully composed. But I could see the signs, the slight tremble in her hand as she held her phone, the way she avoided my gaze. She knew something was wrong. And when I asked about the client, her smile faltered for just a second. We sat down. I let her talk, let her pretend like she was in control. And then, after a few minutes of pleasantries, I dropped the bomb. I knew about the fake invoices. I knew about the new company. I knew she was still trying to siphon clients from the business we'd built together. Her face went pale. "Nathan," she said, trying to maintain composure, but I could see the panic in her eyes. "This isn't how it seems." I cut her off. "I'm not interested in your excuses, Sophia. The fact is, you're about to lose everything you've worked for. The client is already pulling out." She went still, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flash of fear. But then her gaze hardened, and I realized she hadn't given up yet. "Do you think I won't fight back?" she said, her voice low and dangerous. I smiled. "I'm counting on it." The next few weeks were a blur of back-and-forth meetings, emails, and phone calls. But in the end, it didn't matter. She lost that client. And after that, it was like a domino effect. One client after another pulled out. Her reputation began to crumble. It was almost too easy. Liana was the only thing keeping me grounded through all of this. While I tore down the world I once knew, she became the one constant in my life. We spent more time together, dinners, movies, late-night talks. I had no intention of dragging her into my revenge, but she was the one person who didn't look at me like I was a monster. She didn't see me as a broken man. She saw me for who I was, someone who had been hurt. Yes, but someone who was starting to rise again. She had her own scars, too. But unlike Sophia, Liana didn't hide behind them. She didn't try to mask her pain or pretend like she was someone she wasn't. She was real, raw, and that was what I admired most. One night, after dinner, we walked along the river. The moon hung low, casting a silvery glow over the water. It felt peaceful, almost serene. But beneath the calm, something was stirring inside me. "I've been thinking," I said, breaking the silence, "about everything that's happened. About who I was, who I am now, and about where I'm going." She stopped walking and looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "And what have you decided?" I paused, then smiled. "That I'm not done yet. Not by a long shot." The more I watched Alex and Sophia unravel, the more I realized that their downfall wasn't the only thing I was watching. I was watching myself too, watching the man I'd become and the man I was leaving behind. Revenge is a strange thing. It gives you a sense of purpose, a direction. But as you near the end of the journey, you begin to ask yourself, what happens after? It had been months since I'd taken full control of the company. The clients who had abandoned Sophia and Alex were now loyal to me, even more so than before. My business was growing, and I could almost feel the success in my hands. But success, I realized, was just another form of distraction. It didn't fill the emptiness that lingered, that void where love once lived. And then there was Liana. I'd never expected to find someone like her. She wasn't like the others. She didn't need me to be something I wasn't. She didn't need me to be perfect or whole. She saw the cracks in me and didn't shy away from them. And when we were together, it felt like maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild something real. But I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. I wasn't sure if I was ready to let go of the anger, of the need for justice. Part of me was still obsessed with watching Alex and Sophia fall, watching them suffer the way I had suffered. It had become an addiction, like an itch I couldn't scratch. I'd gotten what I wanted. They had lost everything. But there was still this nagging feeling, this sense that something was missing. That maybe, just maybe, I hadn't truly won. The phone call came late one evening. I was sitting in my office, reviewing contracts for a new client, when my phone buzzed. It was from an unknown number. At first, I ignored it. But something told me to answer. I picked up. "Nathan," a familiar voice said on the other end. It was Sophia. My pulse quickened. The cold, bitter taste of the past flooded my mouth. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice shaky, uncertain. "Can we meet?" I didn't hesitate. "Why? So you can beg me for forgiveness?" She was silent for a moment, then spoke, her words coming out in a rush. "No. I need you to know the truth. About everything." I wasn't sure what to expect when I agreed to meet her. I knew this wasn't going to be some simple apology. I knew it was going to be a reckoning. And yet, part of me felt a strange pull, like a moth to a flame. I didn't trust her, but I needed to hear what she had to say. We met at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, a place I'd never been before. She was sitting at a table near the window, a cup of coffee in front of her, her hands wrapped around it like a shield. When she saw me, she didn't smile. Her eyes were red-rimmed, as though she hadn't slept in days. She looked broken, not like the confident, calculated woman I'd once known. I sat across from her, keeping my distance. "So what's this about, Sophia?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She took a deep breath, her fingers trembling slightly as she set her coffee down. "I know what you're thinking," she began, her voice quiet. "You think I did this for the money, for the business, for the power. And in a way, I did. But not for the reasons you think." I raised an eyebrow. "Then what was it for?" She looked away for a moment, as if gathering the strength to speak the words she had been holding back for so long. "I did it because I was lost," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know who I was anymore. When we got married, I thought I had everything figured out. But somewhere along the way, I started to feel empty, like I was just going through the motions. I wasn't the woman I used to be, and I didn't know how to fix it. She paused, her eyes flickering with emotion. And Alex, he was just there. He was a distraction, a way to feel something again, to fill the emptiness. I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant to hurt you. I wasn't sure how to respond. The words felt hollow. What was I supposed to say? That I understood? That I forgave her? I leaned forward, my voice low. Do you know how much you've destroyed? Do you know what you took from me? Her face softened, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I know, she whispered. And I'm sorry. I wish I could take it all back. But I can't. And I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know the truth. I sat back in my chair, absorbing the weight of her words. It was almost too much to process. For so long, I'd seen her as the enemy. But now, in front of me, I saw her as she truly was, a woman who had been searching for something, just like I had. We were both lost, both broken in our own ways. But that didn't change what she had done. You'll never get another chance, I said quietly, looking her in the eye. You've already ruined everything. All I have now is my revenge. And I'm not done yet. The meeting ended with little more than that. I walked out of the cafe feeling more conflicted than ever. Part of me felt like I'd heard everything I needed to hear. But another part of me, the part that had been consumed by anger for so long, didn't know how to feel. Sophia had given me the truth, but it didn't set me free. I was still on this path, the path I had chosen for myself. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could walk it before I lost myself completely. Revenge has a funny way of twisting you. When I first set out to reclaim what was mine, I thought the satisfaction would come with seeing Alex and Sophia fall. I imagined it as a clean victory, a moment when I could stand on top of it all and declare, I won. But it wasn't like that. No, revenge isn't as glamorous as the movies make it out to be. There's no dramatic speech. No last laugh. Instead, it's quiet. It creeps up on you in moments when you least expect it, when you think you've won. And then you realize that you're just as broken as the people you've torn apart. I spent the next few weeks watching Sophia and Alex crumble. The clients kept pulling out, the contracts I'd stolen from them continued to backfire, and the pressure started to mount. Sophia's company, once an ambitious attempt to undermine me, was slipping. She was losing control, and I didn't have to lift a finger to make it happen. I just let the pieces fall where they may. Alex, on the other hand, was a mess. Every time I saw him, whether in the courtrooms or in passing at business events, he looked smaller, like a man who had been swallowed whole by his own lies. I couldn't deny that part of me relished the sight, but another part of me felt nothing. And that's when I realized something. I wasn't getting any satisfaction from watching them suffer. I wasn't reveling in their pain the way I thought I would. Instead, I was just tired. There was no glory in it, no rush of victory, just an overwhelming emptiness that felt like it had been there all along, but I had been too distracted to notice. I spent the next few nights alone, sitting in my office, staring at the same contracts over and over again. The business was booming. Everything was falling into place, but none of it felt meaningful anymore. It wasn't what I had thought I would feel once I won. And then there was Liana. She had been the one bright spot in all of this. She had shown me that there was more to life than just power and success, more than revenge. But I hadn't been honest with her. Not entirely. I had let myself become consumed by the anger and bitterness, and it was starting to show. I hadn't meant to push her away, but I had. Slowly, without even realizing it. One evening, we were having dinner at her apartment. A quiet night, nothing special. She had been telling me about a new project she was working on, her eyes lighting up with excitement as she spoke about the work. I could see how passionate she was about it, how much she cared. But then, she looked at me, really looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw something that made my stomach tighten. Are you okay? She asked, her voice softer than usual. You've been distant. More than usual. I didn't know how to answer. The truth was, I wasn't okay. I hadn't been for a long time, but I didn't want to admit it. Not to her. Not when everything seemed so perfect on the surface. I'm fine, I said, too quickly. Too easily. But she didn't buy it. Look, Nathan, she said, setting her fork down, I get it. You've been through a lot. But I need to know if you're really here. I can't keep waiting for you to show up, only for you to pull away when things get hard. I knew she was right. I was pulling away, slowly retreating into myself. The thing was, I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know how to let go of the anger that had been driving me for so long. The anger that had kept me moving forward, kept me fighting, even when it seemed pointless. But at that moment, something clicked. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, with a kind of understanding I wasn't used to. Maybe it was the realization that I had been so focused on destroying others that I had almost destroyed myself in the process. "I'm sorry," I said, finally letting my guard down. "I've been a mess. I don't know how to fix it." She reached across the table and took my hand. Her touch was gentle, comforting. "You don't have to fix everything, Nathan. But you do need to let go of the past. You need to stop carrying it around like it's the only thing that defines you." I didn't say anything. I just sat there, staring at her hand in mine, trying to make sense of everything that had been happening in my life. I had thought revenge would set me free. I had thought it would make me feel in control again. But now, I wasn't so sure. The next few days were a blur of introspection. I stopped focusing so much on the company, stopped thinking about Sophia and Alex and their inevitable downfall. Instead, I started looking inward. What was I really trying to achieve here? Was this life I was building even the one I wanted? I started spending more time with Liana. We talked about everything, about our pasts, our goals, our fears. She had her own struggles, her own battles. And slowly, I began to see that she wasn't perfect either. But she wasn't running from her pain. She was facing it, head on. And for the first time in months, I found myself wondering if I could do the same. But the past doesn't let you go so easily. One night, after a long day of meetings, I got a call from the one person I hadn't heard from in weeks. It was Alex. I didn't pick up at first, but then I saw the voicemail notification. I listened to it, and his voice sent a cold shiver down my spine. "Nathan," he said, his voice strained, almost desperate. "We need to talk. It's not over. You don't know everything. There's more at stake here than just the company. I don't know who else to turn to, but I swear, you need to hear me out." I wasn't sure what to make of it. Alex had always been a liar, a manipulator. But now, for the first time, there was fear in his voice. And it made me wonder if there was more to the story than I had realized. I deleted the message without responding, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Not yet. I had thought it was over. The business was mine, my revenge had been delivered, and I was starting to rebuild my life with Liana. Everything was moving in the right direction. Or so I thought. But the voicemail Alex had left me, that lingering, desperate message, wouldn't let go. No matter how hard I tried to ignore it, no matter how much I convinced myself that everything was fine, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out of place. At first, I thought it was just the paranoia of someone who's been betrayed. After all, Alex was a liar, a manipulator, and a coward. Whatever he had to say, I didn't owe him a single moment of my time. I had already won. But there was something in his voice. Something that didn't sound like the usual arrogance or bravado I was used to hearing. It sounded like fear. And that scared me more than anything else. I had to know what it was about. I couldn't just leave it hanging there, in the back of my mind, festering. So, I called him. He answered on the third ring, his voice quick, almost relieved. "Nathan," he said. "I'm glad you picked up." I leaned back in my chair, trying to mask my irritation. "Get to the point, Alex. What do you want?" There was a long pause on the other end. Then he spoke, his voice lower now, almost conspiratorial. "It's not what you think. The company, everything, it's not just about business anymore. There's something bigger happening. You need to understand." "Bigger?" I asked, not hiding the skepticism in my voice. "You've already taken everything from me. What's left to fight for?" "Your life," he said, and the words hit me like a punch to the gut. "You don't understand, Nathan. There are things you don't know. Things I didn't want to get into before, but now it's too late." I felt a strange mix of anger and curiosity building inside me. "What the hell are you talking about?" He sighed heavily, and I could almost hear him shifting in his seat, the weight of the conversation settling in. "It's about what we were really doing, what we were involved in when we started the company. The money, the clients, none of that was as clean as you think." I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. "What the hell do you mean? This sounds like bullshit." "I'm not lying, Nathan. I never wanted you to know, but now there's no choice. I made a deal, and you're part of it, whether you like it or not." 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. What was he saying? What kind of deal had we been involved in? And why the hell was he telling me this now? "Listen to me," Alex continued, his voice urgent. "There's a man, a very powerful man. He's been watching us, watching you, for a long time. And I don't think you understand the danger you're in. It's not just about the company or the money anymore. It's about your life. I clenched my fists, my jaw tightening. You're threatening me? No, Alex said quickly, his voice shaking now. I'm warning you. I don't have much time. There's a deadline, and I'm not sure what's going to happen once it's passed. But I can't keep running from this. I've tried. You need to be ready. You need to get out. Get away. Leave the city. Trust me. I felt like the room was closing in on me. What the hell was he talking about? Who was this man he mentioned? And why was Alex so damn scared? You're on your own, Alex, I said coldly, feeling the walls of my office closing in. I don't owe you anything. Not anymore. Nathan, please. His voice was strained, desperate. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm just telling you the truth. You have to believe me. They're coming for you. And with that, the call ended. I stood there, staring at my phone. It didn't make sense. None of it did. But something about his words stuck with me. I couldn't shake the feeling that Alex wasn't lying. There was more to this story, more than just a business deal gone wrong, more than just personal betrayal. Someone was watching me, and I had no idea who they were or what they wanted. But I knew this much. I wasn't going to just sit around and wait to find out. I spent the next few days digging through the company's records again, re-examining everything I thought I knew. I pulled up old contracts, financials, emails, everything that could possibly give me a clue about this deal Alex had mentioned. But no matter how much I searched, there was nothing. It was as if someone had wiped the records clean. And then I found it. A hidden file in the system, encrypted, buried deep in the archives. It had a strange name, a code I couldn't recognize. Without thinking, I decrypted the file. What I saw made my stomach drop. It was a contract, but not one I had ever seen before. It was signed by both Alex and me, and it involved a third party, someone I didn't recognize. The terms were vague, cryptic, but it was clear that this deal went far beyond business. It was a partnership, an arrangement tied to something much darker than I had ever imagined. My heart pounded in my chest as I read through the details, realizing the scope of what we had gotten involved in. And the worst part? The deadline Alex had mentioned, it was real. It was set in stone. I had no idea what I had gotten myself into. But now, it was too late to back out. The file I found was the first crack in the facade I had built. Up until that moment, I had been so focused on getting revenge on Alex and Sophia, so consumed by the idea of reclaiming my life, that I never stopped to question how far I'd gone or who I'd made deals with to get here. That contract was more than just a piece of paper. It was a link to something darker. The third party that was involved, the one whose name I couldn't recognize, wasn't just some obscure investor or a distant business associate. It was a name that sent a shiver down my spine. Someone who had ties to organizations I'd heard of only in whispers. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't ignore it. It was like a thread hanging out of the hem of a jacket, and the more I pulled, the more the entire thing unraveled. The first call I made was to Liana. I had to warn her, at least, about what I was getting into. I didn't want her dragged into this mess. She was everything I had started to build my life around, and I wasn't going to let anything happen to her. I called her and told her I needed to see her. She didn't hesitate, as usual. She met me at the office, and when she saw my face, she knew something was wrong. "What's going on?" she asked, her tone serious. "What aren't you telling me?" I didn't want to lie to her, but I didn't want to drag her into the mess either. Still, I couldn't keep her in the dark. "I'm in trouble, Liana," I said quietly. "The kind of trouble I can't get out of by myself." She stepped closer, concern written all over her face. "What do you mean?" "Nathan, you've been acting strange lately. This isn't like you." I sighed, running my fingers through my hair. "There's something I never told you. Something I never knew about until recently. I was part of a deal, a dangerous deal, and I don't think I can get out of it." Her eyes widened, but she didn't speak right away. She just watched me, as if trying to gauge how much of it was real and how much of it was just a consequence of the tension I'd been under. "I need to know everything," she said finally. "If we're going to make it through this, I need to know who we're really up against." I couldn't protect her from it, and I realized that now. Whatever I was up against, she was going to be affected. And I couldn't live with myself if I didn't bring her in, even if it meant putting her at risk. I showed her the contract, the encrypted files, everything I had uncovered. The more we went through it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about business. It wasn't just about Alex's betrayal. This was something bigger, a conspiracy that stretched far beyond the walls of the company. The third party, the name I had barely been able to make out, was connected to people I didn't know, to organizations that moved in the shadows. They were involved in industries that thrived on secrecy, And the deals they made didn't just affect one person. They affected entire cities, entire economies. This wasn't a corporate war. This was something far more dangerous. They've been watching us, I said softly. They've been watching me since the very beginning. And now I'm in their debt. Liana looked at me, her expression a mix of concern and determination. So, what do we do now? I don't know, I admitted, my voice tight with frustration. But I'm not going down without a fight. I have to find out who's behind all this, and I have to get ahead of them before it's too late. The next few days were a blur. I reached out to every contact I had, trying to dig deeper into the mysterious third party. The more I learned, the more I realized how far I'd fallen into their web. I called in favors from old friends in law enforcement, from ex-business partners, anyone who might have information about the shadow organization. But everything I found led to dead ends. It was like these people didn't exist. Or if they did, they were too powerful to be touched. I couldn't afford to wait any longer. I had to make a move, and soon. Then, I got a call. This time, it wasn't from Alex. It wasn't from Sophia. It was from someone else, a voice I didn't recognize, but one that sent a chill down my spine when I heard it. "You've been digging, Nathan," the voice said, calm and cold. "And you've uncovered things you shouldn't have. We don't like it when people try to pry into our business." I felt a wave of panic hit me, but I didn't let it show. "Who are you?" I demanded. "We are the people you've been dealing with from the start," the voice replied. "And if you don't stop now, the consequences will be severe. We suggest you back off. Or else." The line went dead. I sat there, staring at my phone, my heart pounding. These were the people I had unknowingly aligned myself with. These were the people I had been making deals with, and I had no idea how deep it went. I wasn't just fighting for my business anymore. I was fighting for my life. The next morning, I packed a bag. I wasn't sure what I was walking into, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't face this alone. I needed to find out who these people were, and I needed to do it fast. Liana was by my side as I prepared to leave. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice full of worry. "I don't know yet," I replied, looking at her. "But I'll be back. I promise." "Be careful," she said softly, her hand resting gently on my arm. "Whatever's out there, it's not just about revenge anymore. You have to find a way to fix this, for both of us." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I will. I just need to know the truth." And with that, I walked out the door, not knowing where the road would lead, but knowing that I couldn't turn back. I didn't know what I was walking into when I left that morning. All I had were pieces of a puzzle, scattered fragments that didn't make sense. But there was one thing I did know. The people behind this were powerful. They had connections, resources, and an agenda that extended far beyond anything I had ever imagined. And they were coming for me. I made my way to the outskirts of the city, away from the business district, where the shadows seemed to grow longer. I had received a message, a cryptic one, directing me to meet someone at a warehouse on the edge of town. No name, no details, just an address. My instincts told me this was a trap, but the need for answers, for closure, for understanding what the hell was going on, drove me forward. I arrived at the warehouse just as the sun began to set, casting an orange glow over the industrial landscape. The place was deserted, except for the occasional truck passing by in the distance. The building itself looked abandoned, windows shattered, rust clinging to the steel frame. I parked a few blocks away and walked the rest of the way on foot, careful not to attract attention. As I neared the entrance, a figure stepped out from the shadows, their face obscured by a hood. I froze. "Who are you?" I demanded, my hand instinctively reaching for the gun I kept in my jacket. The figure held up a hand, signaling me to lower my weapon. "I'm not here to hurt you," the voice said, calm and steady. "But if you want answers, this is where you'll find them." I didn't lower my gun. I wasn't stupid. "What kind of game are you playing? Who the hell are you?" The figure stepped closer, their features still hidden. "I'm someone who's been watching you for a long time, Nathan. And I'm the one who can give you the answers you've been looking for." I didn't move. "And why would I trust you?" "Because you don't have a choice," the voice replied, a hint of amusement in their tone. "You've already crossed the line, Nathan. There's no going back." They stepped into the light, just enough for me to see their face, a face I didn't recognize, but one that held a certain familiarity. Cold eyes, sharp features. The kind of face that belonged to someone who had seen things I couldn't even begin to comprehend. "You want to know the truth, don't you?" the person asked, their gaze piercing through me. "You want to understand who's been pulling the strings all this time? I said nothing, my mind racing. Whoever this was, they knew too much. I'll tell you everything, the figure said, stepping forward and handing me a folder. But first, you need to know that nothing in your life has been as it seems. Everything you've built, everything you've lost, it's all part of a much larger game. And now you're in it. I didn't take the folder immediately. I wasn't sure if I could trust this person, if this was just another manipulation, another layer of the deception. But I knew one thing for sure. I needed to understand. I had to know what the hell had been going on behind the scenes. Finally, I reached for the folder, tearing it open. Inside were photographs, documents, and a map. The photographs were of me, and of people I had never met, people I didn't recognize. Business associates, clients, and even people in positions of power, all connected by lines drawn in red ink. The documents were worse. They detailed deals I had made, ones I didn't remember, with names I didn't know. There were even references to secret meetings, transactions hidden under layers of deception. And at the center of it all, one name kept appearing. The name of the man who had been orchestrating this entire operation. Who is this? I asked, pointing to the name. The figure paused for a long moment before responding. That's the man who's been controlling everything. His name is Viktor Novikov. I froze. The name sent a wave of recognition through me. It was a name I had heard whispered in the underworld, in criminal circles. Novikov was a shadow, a figure no one had ever been able to fully pinpoint. He was rumored to be the head of a vast network of influence, spanning politics, business, and organized crime. No one knew exactly what he controlled or how far his reach extended, but everyone knew one thing. You didn't cross Viktor Novikov. But I had. And that's why I was here now. He's been watching me? I asked, my voice tight with disbelief. All this time, since the moment you became involved with Alex and Sophia, the figure said, their voice calm but firm. You were never just a businessman, Nathan. You were a pawn in a much larger game. And now, Novikov wants you to pay the price. I felt a sickening realization settle in my stomach. All of it, the betrayal, the business deals, the strange contracts, had been part of something bigger than I had ever imagined. I had unknowingly stepped into a world of dangerous power plays, and now I was caught in the crossfire. What do I do now? I asked, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. You fight back, the figure said, their eyes glinting in the low light. But be warned, if you go after Novikov, you're not just fighting him. You're fighting an entire system. And it's not something you can destroy alone. I felt the weight of their words. I wasn't just dealing with corrupt business partners anymore. I wasn't over my head. But that didn't matter. I wasn't going to back down now. I took a deep breath. Tell me everything. I had thought I understood danger. I had believed that after all the betrayals, the lies, the pain, I had already seen the worst of it. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly have understood, was the world that Viktor Novikov controlled. It wasn't just business. It wasn't just politics. It was a sprawling empire, one that stretched into every corner of society. The reach he had, the power he wielded, was staggering. And here I was, a pawn who had unknowingly crossed the wrong man. I had no idea what I was truly up against, but I was about to find out. The figure who had met me at the warehouse, the one who had handed me the folder and given me the first pieces of the puzzle, told me I had a choice. I could walk away, leave this all behind, and try to live a life untouched by the darkness that was closing in on me. Or I could fight. I didn't need to think about it. Not even for a second. I'm not walking away, I said, my voice steady. Tell me what I need to do. The figure nodded. You have to get close to Novikov. Close enough to destroy everything he's built. But be careful. If he suspects you're after him, he'll come for you. And his reach goes farther than you can imagine. The first step was understanding Novikov's network. His empire wasn't just built on wealth. It was built on fear, on influence. He controlled key figures in politics, law enforcement, business, and organized crime. The man didn't need to pull strings. He was the puppet master. I spent the next few days preparing. I met with a few of the contacts I had left, some of the ones who had stayed loyal to me after the fallout with Alex and Sophia. I needed information. I needed to know everything about Novikov, who his allies were, where his weaknesses lay, and how I could get to him. It wasn't easy. Novikov's empire was as tight as a drum, with layers of protection built around it. The more I dug, the more I realized how many people were involved, how many lives had been ruined to maintain his hold on power. Every deal, Every betrayal had been orchestrated by him. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I had nothing left to lose. I found out that Novikov's closest allies were scattered across the city, some in positions of power, others in the shadows, running operations that kept his empire growing. I began tracking them, watching their movements, learning their habits. I had to play the long game, a game where every decision, every interaction, could be the difference between life and death. I started to get closer to Novikov's inner circle. I attended meetings disguised as a businessman, someone with the right connections, the right interests. I wasn't afraid to get my hands dirty. If I had to play the game his way to get close enough to take him down, then that's what I would do. But the more I played, the more I realized the stakes weren't just about taking down Novikov. They were about surviving. Every step I took felt like I was walking on a tightrope. One wrong move, and I would be gone. Liana was the one person I could still trust. As I moved deeper into this dangerous world, she became the anchor I held on to. I couldn't tell her everything. She didn't need to know the full scope of the threat that loomed over me. But she knew I was changing. She saw the toll it was taking on me. "You're not the man I met, Nathan," she said one night, her voice soft but firm. "I can see it. You're losing yourself in all of this. And I can't just watch you go down this path." I didn't have a good answer for her. The truth was, I didn't know who I was anymore. The man I had been, the man who had cared about business, about building something, was gone. All that was left was a man consumed by vengeance and the need to survive. "I'm doing this for both of us," I said, trying to reassure her. "I have to finish this, Liana. I can't let him win. Not after everything." But the fear in her eyes told me she didn't believe me. And deep down, I knew she was right. I wasn't doing this for her, not anymore. I was doing it for me, to make sure I wasn't the one who lost everything. Weeks passed, and I got closer to Novikov's circle. I started to see the cracks in his empire. The more I learned, the more I realized just how fragile it all was. Power, when you have it for too long, becomes a house of cards. One push, and it all comes crashing down. But I wasn't the only one watching. I started to feel eyes on me. Everywhere I went, I felt like I was being followed, like I was being studied. Novikov's people had caught wind of what I was doing, and they were making sure I didn't get too far. One night, as I was leaving a meeting with one of Novikov's lieutenants, I was ambushed. I didn't see them coming. I barely had time to react before I was thrown into the back of a van, the doors slamming shut behind me. The smell of gasoline and sweat filled the air as the van sped off into the night. They didn't say anything at first. They didn't have to. I knew exactly who had sent them. Novikov. I was trapped. There was no escaping now, and I had no idea what they wanted from me. The van jerked to a stop, and the door slammed open. I didn't have time to react. Two of Novikov's men pulled me out of the van, one gripping my arms tightly, the other shoving me forward. The cold air hit my face, and I blinked, trying to regain my bearings. I was in some kind of abandoned building, the concrete floor cold beneath my feet. The lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. There was no escape from here, no way out. I'd known this day would come. The moment I stepped into Novikov's world, I knew I would have to pay the price. I had been careless, too focused on revenge to see the bigger picture. Now, standing here in the grip of his men, I realized just how much I had underestimated him. They pushed me into a dimly lit room, and there he was. Viktor Novikov, the man whose empire I had tried to destroy, the man who had been pulling the strings of my life from the shadows. He was sitting at a desk, his hands steepled in front of him, a calm, calculated expression on his face. He didn't look surprised to see me. "You've been quite the problem, Nathan," Novikov said, his voice smooth and cold. "You've stirred things up in ways I didn't anticipate. But that's to be expected. You were always a man with too much pride." I stood there, my hands clenched into fists, trying to keep my composure. "You think you can control everything, don't you?" I spat. "You think you can crush anyone who gets in your way. But you've made one mistake." "Oh." Novikov raised an eyebrow, his expression unchanged. "And what mistake is that?" "You underestimated me," I said, my voice steady now. "You thought I would just roll over and die. You thought you could crush me like you've crushed so many others. But you were wrong." He didn't react. He simply watched me, as if I were some sort of puzzle he was waiting to solve. "You've come this far, Nathan. But this is where your journey ends." I didn't back down. "You've already taken everything from me. You've taken my trust, my life, my future. But I'm not done yet. You won't win. Not like this." For the first time, A small smile tugged at the corners of Novikov's lips. You're brave. I'll give you that. But courage doesn't win battles, Nathan. Power does. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. What was there to say? I had nothing left to lose. I had already lost everything that mattered. The only thing left was my pride. Tell me, Novikov said, standing up slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. What is it that you want, Nathan? You've come so far, and yet, here we are. In the end, it all comes down to a choice. What is it you want? To destroy everything I've built? To ruin my empire? Or do you want your life back? It was the question I had been avoiding. The question that had been eating at me from the moment I stepped into this war. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? Closure? Or was I just trying to escape from the wreckage of my own life? For a long time, I had believed that bringing Novikov down would make everything right, that it would heal the wounds, erase the pain. But now, standing in front of him, I realized how much I had lost along the way. Revenge had consumed me. It had blinded me to the things that really mattered. I had a choice. I could destroy him, burn his empire to the ground, drag him down with me. It wouldn't be easy. I would have to make sacrifices, cross lines that couldn't be uncrossed. But in the end, I would be the one left standing, the one who had taken control of his own fate. Or I could walk away. I could leave this world behind and try to rebuild my life. I could escape the grip of Novikov, escape the web of deceit that had trapped me for so long. But that meant letting go of the anger, the pain, the need for retribution. It meant letting go of everything I thought I was fighting for. And that was the hardest choice of all. I looked at Novikov, his cold, calculating gaze still fixed on me. I saw the man who had orchestrated everything, who had pulled the strings behind the scenes, who had ruined so many lives, including my own. But in that moment, I realized something. He didn't have the power over me that I thought he did. The truth was, he was just a man who had built an empire on fear, on manipulation. And no matter how powerful he was, he couldn't take away my freedom. He couldn't control my choices. I took a deep breath and made my decision. I'm done, I said quietly. I'm not your pawn anymore. You can't control me. Novikov's expression darkened. You think you can just walk away from this? You think you've won? I shook my head. I'm not walking away, Novikov. I'm leaving you behind. I'm done fighting this war. You can have your empire, but I'm not going to destroy myself trying to tear it down. He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. You're a fool. You think you can just leave? You think I'll let you walk away? I met his gaze without flinching. You've already lost, Novikov. I'm not the man I was before. I'm not playing your game anymore. I turned to leave, walking out of the room with my head held high. The door slammed behind me, and I didn't look back. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I had made my choice. I wasn't going to destroy Novikov or his empire. I wasn't going to tear everything down in a blind rage. Instead, I was going to rebuild my life, piece by piece. I was going to find a way to move forward, to leave the past behind. And maybe, just maybe, I would find a way to forgive myself.